Good day, everyone. We'll be looking at conducting literature appraisal to establish a robust conceptual foundation for research. You will agree with me that one of the major problems in research, don't forget that all we do here is about research, and that is why our name is Researchment Academy. We traveled to far University of Benin to identify an erudite professor, and that is Professor Joseph Ahmadu from Department of Agricultural Economics. Prof, over to you.
Thank you very much. The subject before us this moment is conducting literature appraisal to establish a robust conceptual foundation for research. That is the presentation outline. Introduction. Developing a solid conceptual foundation is very essential in the conduct of any research because it provides the basic ideas, principles, and the assumptions that establish the framework that guide the research. If you have a faulty conceptual foundation, it will lead to a faulty research. So the development of a sound and robust conceptual foundation for a research is a function of the availability of valid, reliable, and applicable literature on any phenomenon under investigation. But the problem is that at times, researchers use literature that are not trustworthy, that are not reliable or credible to lay the conceptual foundation for their studies. And this always leads to a faulty finding and conclusion. It is against this backdrop that there is need to conduct literature appraisal for any study in order to employ and apply the appropriate and reliable literature to develop a robust and sound conceptual foundation for research. The objectives of the presentation include: 1, to examine the meaning of conceptual foundation and literature appraisal. Secondly, to examine the importance of conceptual foundation in research. And next, to examine the relevance of literature appraisal in developing conceptual foundation for research, and lastly, to examine how to conduct this literature appraisal. So what is conceptual foundation in research? Conceptual foundation is the set of basic ideas, principles, or propositions that explain the structure of relationships which have been utilized in various research or researches as frameworks, or which is being developed and can be utilized in a particular research you want to carry out. It helps in describing the researcher's understanding of the main concepts under investigation. It also serves as a roadmap that guides the research process by giving clarification concerning relationships between various variables that are expected to affect your study. So in the next slide, you can see there example of conceptual framework concerning food chain research. And so what is literature appraisal? Literature appraisal is a systematic process of evaluating the quality, trustworthiness, rigor, and relevance of a study. It involves evaluating the validity, reliability, and applicability of research articles to ensure that the information you are using or intend to use in evidence-based practice is sound. Literature appraisal can also be referred to as critical appraisal. As time goes on, we'll be using the word interchangeably: critical appraisal, literature appraisal. So we're going to consider briefly the importance of conceptual foundation in research. Number one, it serves as a guide to the research by providing the framework for conducting such research. It enables the researcher to define his research questions, formulate his hypotheses, and select the appropriate methods to be used for the research, and also how to interpret his results. It is also very, very important in clarification of concepts by helping the researcher to understand the basic concepts and principles within a particular field of study. That offers him the context and the framework upon which he can build his study. It also helps in maintaining focus, helping the researcher not to deviate from his objectives while carrying out the study. It helps in practical application of knowledge by bridging the gap between theoretical understanding and practical implementation. And lastly, it helps in carrying out effective problem solving. By having sound understanding of the basic concepts underlying a study will enable the researcher to critically analyze information, identify patterns, and effectively solve whatever problem he or she wants to solve. We also want to examine the relevance of literature appraisal in developing conceptual framework. The first one is the identification of research gaps. It enables the researcher to know the limitations and the weaknesses in the previous studies, and that will help him to have a clear direction for the development of the future research that he wants to carry out. And next is the rational decision making that the literature appraiser will assist the researcher. The next one is the selection of variables for investigation. Having sound knowledge of the concepts and relationships of a process will help the researcher to select the best variables for investigation in his or her own research. It is also very vital as evidence-based practice because it ensures that decisions on nature of conceptual framework to be developed are made based on the best available evidence. It also helps in the improvement of research output quality. The application of reliable and high-quality literature can improve the quality of the conceptual framework that needs to be developed, which in turn will improve the outcome of the research findings. So how do we conduct the literature appraisal? There are a number of steps that one can follow to conduct literature appraisal. Step one is identifying the study type. Step two, identifying the appropriate criteria and checklist. Step three, selecting an appropriate set of criteria and checklist. Step four is performing the appraisal. And lastly, summarizing, reporting, and using the result of what you have actually found out. Looking at step one, identifying the study type. There are different types of studies. And before you carry out literature appraisal, you must understand what type of study is this. We have analytic study. Analytic study is basically concerned with quantifying relationship between variables. And under this, we have experimental. It could be experimental study. An example of that is the randomized controlled trial. And it can be observational analytic study. And then the second category is descriptive study, which is non-analytic. Under this, it can be survey, cross-sectional survey study, or qualitative study. And there are a number of questions that one can address if you want to know what study or what type of study an article you want to appraise is. Number one, having found the article, you can ask, what was the aim of the study? If the aim of the study is simply to describe a population, it means the study is a descriptive study. If the aim is to quantify relationship between factors or various variables, then it means it is an analytic study. So if it is an analytic study, you can further ask, what was the intervention? Was the intervention randomly allocated? That is talking about the treatments involved. How were they allocated? Were they randomly allocated? If the answer is yes, it means it is a randomized controlled trial. If the answer is no, it means it is an observational study. And so by this, you will be able to know that this particular study is either analytic or descriptive. Step two, having identified the type of study, then the next step is for you to identify the appropriate criteria and checklist in order to appraise that study. And for you to do that, there are vital questions that you need to answer. Number one, does this study address a clearly focused question? Secondly, did the study use valid methods to address this question? Thirdly, are the valid results of the study important? And lastly, are these valid, important results applicable to the population? And for you to address these questions, there are various tools and checklists that you can use. And you can see below the link that you can access various critical appraisal full list of checklists and tools given by Queen Margaret University 2025. I just picked some few examples of these various tools and checklists. You can see them there. We have CRAAP, and we have prompt, we have SIFT, hamster, and a number of them. In step 3, selecting an appropriate set of criteria and checklists. Having identified the type of study and having identified the various criteria and checklists, then this step 3 is for you to choose the tool that aligns with the identified study type and the specific research questions being addressed. For example, to evaluate sources, you can use the CRAAP Test. To evaluate systematic study, you can use the hamster tool, and a number of those tools and checklists which we have just gone through. You pick the ones that best suit the study type that you want to appraise. This step 4 is actually performing the appraisal. And in performing the appraisal, you are now to apply the chosen tool systematically to evaluate the study's quality. And we have a number of applications which we want to use here today as an example. The first application there is the smart search in Google Files, followed by the evaluating sources, the CRAAP test. We're going to look at that briefly, and then synthesizing findings. And lastly, not taking tips, employing the annotation method. Application 1, the smart search in Google Files. And before you start appraising the appraiser of any literature, you need to locate that file from any database or from any catalog or from the website. And so smart search in Google Files is a tool that is designed to facilitate the location of articles from any catalog or database. And you can search for that by using keywords to uncover the various studies that you want to carry out literature appraisal on. So step 1, the smart search in Google Files continuum. For you to do that, you will have to first activate the smart search in Google Files in your device, whether it's your laptop or your handset. What you need to do is to download the files by Google from your Play Store. Then you turn on your smart search, and then you are good to go. And for you to do that, there are a number of steps that you have to follow. The first step is for you to open the files by Google app, and then you click on the hamburger in the upper left corner of it. Then you will see settings. You click on settings. Then you Google on the smart search option. By the time you do that, your smart search is activated on your device. Then you can now go to the search bar at the top of the files by Google and type in the name of what you want to search. And then you move on from there to locate the file or the article that you want to appraise. Okay, step 2, that is the application 2, evaluating sources, the CRAAP test. So we follow them one after the other. The C is the currency, and that determines the timeliness of the information. Further questions that you need to ask is, when was this information published or posted? Has the information been revised or updated? Is the information current or out of date for your study? Are the links external? So you need to address these questions. For example, if you want to carry out a study on population and you have a population figure by the 2006 population census, and you are applying that figure in today's research, well, that information is outdated. It needs to be projected to the current population so that the information will be current for your study. Relevance is finding out the importance of the information for your needs. Does the information relate to your topic or answer your research question? Who is the intended audience? Is the information at the appropriate level? That is, whether it is too elementary for your study or it is too advanced for your study. You need to consider that, among other questions. Then the first A is authority. Authority is actually the source of the information. Who is the author, the publisher, or the sponsor of the information? You have to verify the author. Are the author's credentials given? Are the organizational affiliation of the authors provided? What are the author's credentials? These are among the things that you need to verify in order to ensure that the information you're using is credible, is reliable. If you are using information from the website, you know that there are domain names that you need to consider. You have .com, .edu, .gov, .org, and so forth. So you will ask yourself whether the domain name has any information to do with the source of that information, whether the domain's name is a reliable one. And you need to confirm that to ensure that the information you are using is very, very reliable. Then the second A in that acronym is accuracy. Accuracy is simply the reliability, truthfulness, and correctness of the content of the literature you are using. And you can ask a number of questions like, where does the information come from? Is the information supported by evidence? Has the information been reviewed? Is it a peer-reviewed literature or not? And you need to verify that among a number of questions. And the last letter there in that acronym is purpose. It's P, and that P is purpose, which is the reason the information exists. What is the reason for the existence of this information? What is the purpose of the information? Is it to inform? Is it to sell? Is it to entertain? Is it to persuade people? And so forth. So that will assist the researcher to know the intention of the publisher or the author. Is the information a fact, opinion, or just propaganda? This also needs to be considered. So we continue with step 4 of how to perform the appraisal. Application 3 is synthesizing findings. There are situations that you will have studies or information or data from various sources that you need to consider in your work. And so this application, synthesizing findings, is very, very important. It is concerned with evaluation of information from multiple research sources to identify patterns, terms, and relationships in order to create a comprehensive understanding of a topic and informing broader conclusions. This synthesizing findings is viewed as a group effort to take all the interviews, data collected, findings from various studies and filter them to form a comprehensive overview so as to identify the data that is relevant in your study. So key aspects of these synthesizing findings include integration of multiple sources, identification of patterns and terms, identification of gaps in those information you obtain, and then you now form your new insights, which you will apply in your study. We have a number of methods that you can employ for synthesizing findings. It can be quantitative methods or qualitative method. Example of quantitative method is meta-analysis that you can employ. And this meta-analysis is a statistical technique that combines the results of multiple studies in order to synthesize information and draw more robust conclusions from them. And then the qualitative method is simply descriptive. It could be a written narrative where you can also use tables, you can use graphical representation in order to synthesize information. So we want to look at the application 4 that we want to consider in our today's presentation, which is not taking tips. And we want to use annotation method as an example. Usually the tasks of research process can cause a researcher to get lost in the sea of information and then causing him to lose track of the information or the sources of information he's using. And so not taking tips, specifically the annotation method, is a tool that helps the researcher to keep track of the sources of information he's using for his study. Note taking enables the researcher to take effective notes, choose effective methods to take the note. It can also help him to capture the key points or the key information and also organize his notes in a logical way, review them from time to time, and draw a comprehensive conclusion from the note, and then apply it to his study. We have different approaches that can be used in the note taking, but the approach that we want to use as an example in this presentation is the annotation method. The annotation method is a note-taking method that involves writing directly onto a text, such as your slide or your lecture note, your photocopy or scanned document. And you can do this manually or you can do it digitally. It offers a summary of the source that you intend to use for your research, as well as the source you want to appraise. And this method is very, very important, very, very ideal for taking down key points and then tracking citations efficiently. It can also help the researcher to have deeper understanding by highlighting and also underlying various texts or concepts in the slide or text that he has. Then how do we annotate? The first thing you need to do is to get the copy of the document you want to annotate, either by downloading the information from the website or by printing that document. And then you read the content of the document, and then you write down any questions arising from what you have read. You also note down the key concepts and short comments that you want to make in the margin of that document. You can employ the effective note-taking strategies, such as the use of abbreviations, the use of symbols, the use of highlighting with different colors, so as to differentiate between different types of information. And by doing that, you'll be able to track the important information that you need. You can annotate digital documents. If it is a Google Documents or Microsoft Word document, you can highlight a text and add comments to it. In fact, you can open the document, click on review on your laptop, a review icon, and then you see where you need to add comments. Then you can add comments, you can delete the comments. If you're going through the comments made by another researcher on your article, you can accept the comment or you can reject the comment. If it is PowerPoint, there are notes and comment fields within the PowerPoint sections that you can use, where you can take down your notes or you can comment. You can also print the document and use manual if you want to utilize manual annotation in your document. You can also digitize physical text. If you have a physical text, you can scan that document and turn it to digital document where you can annotate. How to keep track of your sources. Note-taking annotation method helps you to keep track of the sources of your information, and there are a number of steps that you need to follow. The first one, you can create a Google document or a Word file to keep track of the sources of information you obtain. You can copy and paste in that document. You can also create a folder for a specific project work, so that any information you obtain or any literature you obtain, you can just save that article in that folder. And that will save you the time of looking for that article over and over again. You can also email the hyperlink of the web source of the article or the full citation to yourself. In fact, email it to yourself so that anytime you want to go back to that document, you can easily go back to it. You can also import sources of that information or that literature to a software called Zotero. And that software is very, very vital for storing and citing and also organizing potential sources of information that you access. You can also print out the article if you are sure that what you are looking for, it is in that article. And then you can always keep a working digital bibliography of the various sources of the information you obtain. In fact, that will save you a lot of time of trying to organize your references. That is a typical example of annotation method of note taking. The last step of how to conduct literature appraisal is that of summarizing, reporting, and using the results of your findings. So what you need to do here is to interpret and integrate the findings into the overall evidence of the assessment you want to carry out, and then develop your conceptual framework that you want to use for your study. And the last thing here is the conclusion. Let me go through the conclusion. Literature appraisal offers researchers with comprehensive understanding and diverse tools for accessing and evaluating research documents or findings, which are instrumental in developing a comprehensive conceptual framework for research. And been able to run through various steps involved in the literature appraisal, which we said identifying the study type, then identifying the appropriate criteria and checklist that you want to use. Then you select the appropriate set of criteria and checklist, and then you perform the appraisal. And lastly, you summarize, report, and use the results of your appraisal for your study. And then we have also considered different applications that we can employ in performing the appraisal. We just use some specific examples, and that include the smart search in Google Files, where we use to locate our literature, then evaluating the sources, which we use the example of CRAAP Test. And then we also look at the example of synthesizing findings and then not taking tips, employing the annotation method. Thank you very much for listening.
Professor, what I noticed is that in most cases, our students always believe that literature review is like a walk away, where most of them will look at related work and do virtually a copy out of the literature review in the paper they are considering. And that is why in most cases, when you have a combination of papers or work that has been completed, and you copy all the literature review, and you put them in your own, you agree with me from your experience that that is why we have a lot of disjoint, maybe from paragraph to paragraph, where students is not looking at what is the last paragraph and what is this next paragraph talking about, especially when you are talking of a particular subject matter within your literature review. And I want you to take note of this, because I'm sure that for most of our participants and those who will be listening to this on our YouTube will also be so much interested in how do we avoid such mistakes. I'm happy that you have taken us to the various steps on how to conduct, how to sit down, sieve, even give example of the annotations and how to bring out what is relevant in any particular paper or publication that you are using for your literature review. But I will not be asking all the questions. This is the time to allow our participants to bring out their questions from the audience.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. In fact, I'm working on my project right now, and that's where I am stuck right now. My project supervisor told me that I should review my literature once again and give it some kind of heading, that I should review it in a form that I should put it in form of heading, like group it together. Maybe some couple of researchers, they have done a particular literature review that has to do with some topic, let's say economic growth and exchange rates. Then others have done, let's say, economic growth, inflation, and exchange rate. He said I should review it like that. So I want to just ask that, can I also review my article in a way that it will encompass all the variables of interest?
Thank you very much, Adeleye. And Prof, you agree with me that those are some of the concerns that I said people will raise. And I'm happy that Adeleye is bringing it out. This is like maybe in our social science research, where we want to topicalize our literature review. in agri-economics, for example, extension and the likes, or even in sociology, we want to review based on the subject matter, especially the specific objectives. For example, Adele has given a good example. He said maybe part of the objective is economic growth that you are looking at. It therefore means that you need a title that captures that, which he has not done, and the supervisor is sending him back to doing that. So what should he be talking about? Over to you, Prof.
Okay, thank you very much. You know, when you want to review your literature, you look at your objectives and your literature, just as you said that your supervisor told you, your literature must cover all aspects of your research work, which has to do with your objectives. And you have to consider the various topics that cover your objective and let your literature review cover all of them. You can have the theoretical framework or the conceptual framework that we are talking about here. You have the theoretical framework. If there are various theories that talk about what you want to work on, you have to discuss those theories. Then if there are various concepts, basic ideas, principles, propositions that explain the structure of relationships that other people or other researchers have used as a framework for their studies that you need to employ and also adapt in your own work, you need to discuss that. And that is the conceptual framework that we are talking now. And then you have the empirical review talking about the findings of other researchers. You have the methodological review, what methods the other researchers used in carrying out their studies. And so in all these areas, you look at your objectives and pick those information that relate to your objectives and review them. So you have to cover all. So if you are writing a paper for publication, for example, where you don't have the space to bring in elaborate information, but you need to compress your information in such a way that all the vital concepts, all the vital information are captured in your review. Thank you very much.
Adele, I want to believe that Prof has taken care of some of your concerns. The emphasis on empirical review, maybe to give further clarification, is that if, for example, you are looking at the growth with respect to individual or farm organizations, then you want to look at past literature that has spoken on same issue and consider their findings. It is their own findings that you bring in as your literature review. And that is why you want to do pros and cons. Okay, Mr. A, 2005, found that the growth was low for whatever reason, while Mr. B in another location elsewhere found that the growth was high. You have to bring all those things together. And it is when you do that very well that you will have something reasonable to say when you get to your chapter 4, when you get to your own findings, where you want to compare what you have found with what we call the previous findings. So from your own findings now, does it agree with that of Mr. A? Or does it agree with that of Mr. B? What accounts for the difference between what you are getting and that of Mr. B, which your findings did not agree with? And that is why the issue of literature review, you cannot throw it away, because if you don't do it well, you will be dried when you get to chapter 4, because you are seeing your own result, but you can't compare it to any other person's own, because you didn't take your time to look at what others have found with respect to those variables that you are looking for. I think that clarifies it.
My question is not directly for this presentation, but having reviewed so many manuscripts from developing countries, particularly our dear country, Nigeria, I found out that there are a lot of lapses when it comes to literature appraisal. You will see someone talking about A, and you will be seeing B, C, D that are different from what the person is supposed to be discussing. So I don't know where the problem comes in. Is it that this area is not considered in our content, course content, or what's supposed to be covered at various level of studies? Or is it that the supervisors are not taking care of what the students are supposed to do? And lastly, you will see that 4 or 5 authors are on a manuscript. And when you look at the names, because there's something that was mentioned during the presentation that we need to evaluate the author, the reputation, who is the author. And that is being considered in the word scale. They take that so seriously. But sometimes we look at some of the authors on a manuscript, supposed big authors. But when you look at the content, it's not measured up to the standard expected from such author. So it baffles me that sometimes some authors don't even participate in the manuscript. They don't even go through it. Now, my own question is a general question. It's not only to the speaker, but how can we as a nation or as a region, Africa, tackle this problem? What if we want to draw a kind of framework from this edition to tackle issues in writing introduction, because this edition focus more on writing introduction part of our work, either thesis, article, or whatever. But how can we go in this?
Thank you for that question. Let's get Prof's reaction to the salient issues that you have raised. You have raised issue of unrelated content. You have raised issue of where's the problem coming from. Is it that our teaching of research methodology now, is that where we are getting it wrong? Then you have also raised the issue of authorship, that is looking at the background of who is making this valid statement. I'm happy that Prof mentioned sources where you want to get, literature that are very concrete, that have been published.
Now, before Prof will answer, let me make this comment, and probably Prof will also try to throw more light on that. Yes, based on what Dr. Mrs. said, I think the major problem is that we don't place so much priorities on the literature review, especially in this part of the world. I know in many seminars for students, we concentrate more on introduction and methodology. And of course, we are going to run into problems if we concentrate on introduction and methodology. Because I know for you to write a solid article, a solid research paper, a solid seminar paper, or thesis, I think the starting point should be literature review. And I was equally making that mistake in the past. But recently, I discovered that for any of my master's students and PhD students, what I do tell them is that for you to start your work at all, you must review certain number of literature. For undergraduate, I will tell them, go and read like 10 articles in your area. So download, read, and also let me see, so that we will discuss. In fact, it is from the literature review that you get your topic.
A lot of insights.
But most times we don't do it. So, and it becomes a problem, and that's why you see somebody working on A, and by the time you look at the literature review, you are saying C, D, and they are not related to A. It becomes a major problem. That's my comment.
Prof, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. In research, for you to have a very sound research, it requires commitment and also sacrifice. And you discover that is what is lacking in our attitude today towards research. Most researchers in this part of the world do not have enough commitment and sacrifice to be made. Well, sometimes we blame government and say that we're not properly taken care of. And that is the truth of it. Researchers in this part of the world, they are not properly taken care of. And so they are striving to make up with so many things. Sometimes they even utilize their resources to carry out research. And so that brings down the morale, that brings down the commitment and the level of sacrifice they commit in order to have a very sound research. To review an article, you see that the researcher or the author may not have that enough time, that commitment to review it. And so because of that, you see so many flaws in the article. So if what is coming into the course of that researcher is not enough. He may put his hands into so many other things, other businesses, so he may not have enough time to go through the work. And then secondly, just like Dr. Koledoye said, according priority to what you do is very, very important. Probably because there is not much priority accorded to that aspect of the work. So whenever there is any presentation, let's just go through the introduction, look at the objectives, this problem statement, look at the methodology, and that is all. Literature review is always relegated to the background. And so that contributed to this kind of problem that we are having. And so because of that, many of the students also have that mentality that literature review is not also very, very important. And so they play down on it. But that is the aspect that will enable the researcher to carry out a very, very good research work. Thank you.
There's a question here. I need clarification on the differences between conceptual review, conceptual framework, and literature appraisal.
When you are talking about the conceptual framework, you are talking about the various concepts or the basic ideas or the principles and propositions that explain the structure that govern a given relationship in a study. And that is what some other person might have developed to use in their studies, or is what you want to develop to use in your own study. Let me put it in this way. What are the various variables that you think, or various factors that you think will affect your study? How do they relate? And that is what you are trying to consider in conceptual framework. And so, for example, if you want to carry out economic analysis of maize production, for example, what are the factors that are supposed to affect maize production? So you now have the independent variables affecting the dependent variables. The independent variables are the land, the fertilizer, the herbicides that are being used. And then the dependent variable is the output, which is the yield of your maize. So how do these variables affect your output? And then there are other intervening variables, other factors around that also affect the production. They may not be directly inputs, but they also affect the production. So by the time you put all of them together, you look at how they relate, how they will affect output, and how they will affect your research. It will not trigger up the kind of research questions that you want to ask. And then literature appraiser, you're trying to verify the various sources of the information you obtain. You have an article published by an author, so you want to carry out a systematic way of evaluating that article, looking at the validity, the reliability, and the applicability of that information in that article to your study. Is the article valid? Is it from a reliable source? Or somebody just sat somewhere and cooked the information and put it on the website? So you look at the validity, reliability, and how applicable it is to your study. So that is the process of.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think you have hinted it. You just conceptual framework. I'm just re-echoing what Prof have said. What is the relationship between your dependent and independent variable? And probably move further to what is the outcome that we are expecting. That's a framework. So it now looks like a diagram that packages all the dependent variable in one side, package the dependent variable on another side, and an arrow showing what is their relationship, until you now get maybe the third component of the diagram that shows, oh, this is the outcome we are expecting. Then intervening variable can take off from between the relationship of the independent and the dependent variable and say, okay, these intervening variables, government policy, time, and all those things will affect the results that we are going to get. While conceptual review is to now see, what did author A say about these relationships? What did Mr. B say? Because all of them will not say the same thing. And Prof has added that don't stop there. Look at the Mr. A and Mr. B. Who are they? Where is their publication? On that note, I want to give a short story of the first Israeli workshop that I attended, where the resource person that was taking us In fact, it is from that day that I took literature review and sources as important. It's not even majorly in agriculture, it's about climate issues, modeling and others. And he got an author who said something. This man talking is from Israel. He was there, he has sent message and email to author about what they said and couldn't get it. What baffles me most is that this man has to travel from one country to another because he's trying to verify just one claim. I was shocked. I said, when are we going to get to this? When are we going to get to this level? And because I feel that for us to even move from one place to the other within our school, that you check social library you couldn't get, you check another library, or even on the internet, you check social place you couldn't get, to move from another place becomes difficult. And that is why I agree with Prof when you talk about commitment, sacrifice. Even when you have the books placed in front of you, all the books are placed. Some of us are so lazy in opening each of the books for that verification and sourcing. So thank you very much, Prof, for hammering on the importance of that while answering questions about the difference between conceptual framework and conceptual